This vehicle was a true technical aberration on tracks, a paradoxical steel coffin that its designers, in a fit of madness, equipped with a highly explosive radial aircraft engine, ensuring that even a single penetrating hit would transform the fighting compartment into an instantaneous funeral pyre. Why did the engineers compel their crews to literally straddle a rapidly spinning drive shaft and perform a lethal acrobatic routine in a turret devoid of a safety basket, all while charging toward a certain death against enemy armour that was technologically superior by an entire generation? We shall reveal why British troops nonetheless adored this rolling anachronism for its mechanical reliability, even as Soviet tankers cursed this Trojan horse, frequently refusing to lead into battle, what they considered a logistical insult. Discover how an inoffensive and undergunned scout mutated in the stifling jungles of the Pacific to become a sadistic instrument of destruction, capable of incinerating its enemies alive inside their bunkers, and by what grotesque miracle this desperately obsolete vestige of the Second World War survived to roll again. Like a Frankenstein's monster grafted with disproportionately large modern cannons across the battlefields of South America nearly 40 years later. In the spring of the year 1940, amidst a climate of industrial panic, the engineers at Rock Island Arsenal initiated the hurried development of a new light tank, drawing upon the painful lessons of the early European campaigns, though the final result, the M3 light tank, was in truth merely a bloated and barely modernised successor to its obsolete ancestor, the M2A4. The primary military requirement consisted of nothing more than a crude thickening of the armour, which drove the steel plates of the hull front to 51mm and the sides to 38mm. A weight-intensive modification that burdened the machine considerably and forced a massive strengthening of the suspension, along with the installation of a larger diameter idler wheel to compensate for the increased track contact area. Although the vehicle was officially adopted in July 1940 and launched into mass production in March 1941 by the American Car and Foundry Company, its fundamental design remained a glaring technological anachronism, characterized by a dangerously high silhouette and vertical riveted armor plates that gave it more the appearance of a basic armored agricultural tractor than a modern engine of war. When the British Army, desperately seeking material to replenish its losses in North Africa, received these machines, the crews, accustomed to the chronic breakdowns of their own tanks, enthusiastically christened this American creation Honey, praising its exceptional mechanical reliability that allowed it to run endlessly where English tanks would have perished. However, this automotive robustness was but a dangerous illusion, for the euphoria of piloting a tank that did not break down caused the men to forget they were sitting in an archaic tin can, utterly unsuitable for modern warfare against German anti-tank guns, a fatal weakness that was destined to reveal itself in the most brutal fashion during the first direct exchange of fire. Beneath the riveted plating of this steel anachronism lay a power plant that perfectly illustrated the technical absurdity of American design philosophy during those years. Rather than opting for a robust and safe diesel engine, the engineers made the aberrant choice of a 7-cylinder air-cooled radial engine, the Continental W679A, originally conceived to propel aircraft through the heavens rather than armoured beasts through the mud. This mechanical heart generated a respectable 250 horsepower at 2,400 revolutions per minute, yet it forced the logistics chain to haul highly volatile aviation gasoline with an octane rating of at least 92 to the front lines, transforming every hit to the engine compartment into a lethal risk of an instantaneous firestorm. The use of this vertical aeronautical aggregate also dictated the vehicle's grotesquely tall silhouette, while the interior was brutally bisected into two cramped halves by the massive drive shaft that tunneled through the hull to connect the rear-mounted engine to the front transmission, a metal obstacle that the crew was forced to literally ride like a horse. While the driver and his assistant occupied adjustable seats equipped with safety belts, the gunner and loader in the turret were condemned to a lethal acrobatic routine. Because the tank lacked a turret basket tied to the floor, they were forced to stumble clumsily over the drive shaft and ammunition crates in an exhausting dance whenever the weapon rotated. The main armament itself, a 37mm M6 gun in an M22 mount, appeared formidable on paper with its muzzle velocity of 884 meters per second and a theoretical penetration of 53mm at a distance of 457 meters but in practice it proved utterly impotent against the frontal armour of modern adversaries. Although the piece featured a stabilisation system advanced for its time, intended to allow accurate fire on the move, the complexity of its operation and the laughably weak explosive effect of the tiny shells rendered this technological marvel often useless in the brutality of daily combat, reducing the machine to a vehicle that could drive fast but could hardly inflict serious damage on a real enemy. The initial euphoria surrounding the vehicle's mechanical reliability evaporated with staggering speed in the merciless reality of the North African desert, as Allied commanders committed the fatal blunder of deploying the M3, with its paper-thin armour and anemic armament, as an offensive breakthrough weapon against battle-hardened German units. While early skirmishes against obsolete Italian models offered deceptive successes that lulled Allied vigilance, the Battle of Gazala in May 1942 exposed the absolute inferiority of the American design with soul-crushing brutality when the 8th Hussars Regiment collided head-on with the Panzer III and Panzer IV of the Afrika Korps. British crews were forced to witness the demoralising spectacle of their 37mm projectiles shattering harmlessly against German frontal plates, while the enemy's long-range guns punched through the high, riveted superstructures of the Stuarts from distances the American weapon could not even hope to bridge. This painful lesson was repeated with even greater ferocity during the arrival of the American 1st Armoured Division during Operation Torch, where inexperienced crews were literally pulverised at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, against the heavy Tiger tanks and the dreaded 88mm anti-aircraft guns used in a direct fire role. The light M3 appeared as a fragile toy that, upon the slightest direct hit, transformed instantly into a blazing torch, a catastrophic vulnerability that led American forces to lose 183 tanks of all types in a single week, while Axis losses remained negligible in direct comparison. Following this operational debacle, the strategic doctrine of fielding light tanks on the primary line of battle in Europe was buried forever, and the vehicle was begrudgingly demoted to pure reconnaissance duties, with no one yet suspecting that the true calling of this technological outsider lay not in the vast open deserts, but awaited it in a completely different, impenetrable environment. While the American High Command on the European theatre had already written off the light tank as a tactical blunder, a grotesque renaissance of this vehicle was unfolding at the other end of the world. The impenetrable jungles of the Pacific Islands often made the deployment of heavy medium tanks impossible, suddenly favouring the agile, albeit weakly armoured M3. In this green, humid hell where visibility was frequently reduced to less than 20 metres, the anemic range of the 37mm gun no longer posed a handicap, and in direct comparison with even more archaic Japanese designs like the Hogo or the Chiha, whose armour often failed to withstand even heavy machine gun fire, the American design appeared almost superior. Yet, even in this scenario, a grave weakness in the armament was quickly revealed, for the minuscule high-explosive shells of the main gun possessed an explosive force so derisory that they shattered without the slightest effect against massive enemy fortifications constructed from coconut logs and compacted earth. Out of this operational necessity, Marine Corps engineers improvised one of the most terrifying variants of the war. They gutted the now useless turret of certain vehicles, removing the cannon to install a Ronson flamethrower fed by a 170-litre tank integrated directly into the hull. These radical conversions, christened Satan, transformed the tank originally designed as a simple scout into a mobile siege engine capable of incinerating enemy fortifications on Saipan and Tinian directly through their firing slits, thereby granting the vehicle a new, albeit macabre, reason for existence. While American Marines were learning to appreciate their modified Stuarts in the Forge of the Pacific, thousands of these gasoline-powered machines were simultaneously being shipped to the frozen expanses of the Eastern Front, where Soviet tank crews greeted these American gifts with a mixture of skepticism and open rejection. The arrival of 1,232 units on the Eastern Front marked the beginning of one of the most misunderstood chapters of military cooperation, as Soviet tankers viewed the M3, which they soberly recorded in their registries as the M3 Light, more as a cumbersome logistical burden than a true operational reinforcement. Technical absurdity reached its zenith here, for the Soviet supply chain, calibrated almost exclusively to provide the robust diesel required for the domestic T-34, was suddenly forced to deliver astronomical quantities of high-octane aviation gasoline just to keep these finicky American engines running in the brutal Russian frost. Beyond this dangerously flammable fuel, the vehicle's grotesquely tall silhouette proved to be a fatal disadvantage on the flat steppes. Unlike the low-profile Soviet designs, the tank was practically impossible to camouflage and offered a perfect target for German anti-tank defences, especially since the Red Army often ruthlessly sacrificed these light units in suicidal frontal assaults within mixed formations. Although individual commanders such as Lieutenant Pavkin in September 1942 managed to neutralise 11 enemy vehicles through skillfully laid ambushes, such exploits remained statistical anomalies that could not hide the general uselessness of the 37mm gun against the ever-thickening armour of the Wehrmacht. The Soviet command's dissatisfaction with this type of vehicle grew to such an extent that Moscow officially rejected any further deliveries as of May 1943, a blunt refusal that, paradoxically, did not incite American engineers to abandon the concept, but instead spurred them to attempt to keep this obsolete design artificially alive through radical modifications. While the Red Army was sending this vehicle to the scrap heap, American designers were desperately trying to compensate for the widening technological chasm through profound structural modifications, culminating in the M3 variant. This iteration, featuring a fully welded hull and a glacis plate sloped at 20 degrees, suggested a visual modernity that failed to address the core issue of anemic firepower. Instead, it merely added 2 tons of dead weight and forced the transmission to adopt a new gear ratio of 2.57 to 1. The British, by contrast, having long since diagnosed the 37mm gun's near-zero combat value, took a far more radical path. They performed a surgical strike on the design by simply removing the entire turret from many of their conversions, christened Stuart Recce, or Kangaroo. By stripping the vehicle of its original function, they ironically rendered it useful at last, transforming it into a light, high-speed armoured personnel carrier or artillery tractor. However, the zenith of improvisational art was reached by Yugoslav partisan units, who treated the robust American chassis as a mere motorised pack mule. They joined it in a bizarre technical marriage with captured German weaponry, such as the potent 75mm Pak 40 anti-tank gun or the quadruple 20mm Flak 38 mount, proving through the absurd that the American tank could only achieve a respectable sting by being grafted with the lethal technology of its enemy. Yet, even these exotic hybrids did not signal the end of this tenacious design, for while the great industrial nations were consigning their fleets to the blast furnaces at the close of hostilities, the M3 was poised to embark on a second, astonishingly long career in a completely different hemisphere, defying every rational prediction regarding the lifespan of such a desperately obsolete engine of war. Following the conclusion of the global conflict, while the industrial superpowers were mass dispatching their surplus stocks to the scrapyards, the M3 embarked upon a staggering third life in Latin America, where it served for decades as the primary weapon system in the armies of Brazil, Colombia and Ecuador, nations that simply lacked the financial means to acquire more modern alternatives. The absolute zenith of technical absurdity, however, was not reached until the late 1970s in Brazil, when the firm Bernardini launched a demented venture to transform this rusted relic of the early 40s into a modern main battle tank by removing virtually everything except the lower hull tub and the road wheels to replace them with contemporary components. The result of this radical surgery, designated the X1A, was propelled by a modern Saab Scania diesel engine, producing 280 horsepower, which accelerated the mass, now increased to 15 tons, to a speed of 60 km per hour, while a massive 90mm French Diffa cannon replaced the original, ridiculous 37mm weapon, imposing a firepower upon the chassis for which it was never physically dimensioned. The fact that a tank originally designed to combat the minuscule Japanese Heigo was suddenly, nearly 40 years later, prowling the South American jungle equipped with a modern fire control system, confirmed the thesis formulated as early as 1945 by the Soviet professor Gruzdev, that while the Stuart possessed excellent mobility as a cavalry mount, it constituted a fundamental conceptual error as a battle tank due to the fatal imbalance between its agility and its firepower. The story of this vehicle does not end, therefore, with a logical death by technical obsolescence, but with the ironic realization that it was precisely this tank, judged inept on European battlefields and cursed by its own crews for its weakness, that, thanks to its simplistic mechanics and infinite modifiability, remained in active service nearly half a century longer than its far more powerful, complex and celebrated competitors.